The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Coldwater Ridge, a forgotten frontier town where the only thing that moved with any urgency was the tumbleweeds dancing across the dirt roads. The general store stood like a stalwart guardian in the center of town, its weathered sign creaking gently in the hot breeze. Inside, Sam Granger moved with the deliberate slowness of age, his weathered hands carefully arranging penny candies in their glass jar. At 72, Sam's back hunched slightly, his silver hair thin but meticulously combed, and his clothes, though worn, remained spotlessly clean. The townsfolk regarded him with the kind of respect reserved for fixtures, like the old church bell or the town's single water pump. Necessary, but hardly remarkable. "Morning, Mr. Granger," they'd say, nodding politely as they collected their flour and sugar. Few bothered to wonder about the quiet man's past or notice how his eyes, still sharp as a hawk's, caught every detail of his surroundings. "Need anything else, Mrs. Peterson?" Sam asked, his voice gentle as he wrapped a small parcel of coffee beans in brown paper. "That'll do just fine, Sam. You take care now." The woman smiled, gathering her basket as the shop bell tinkled softly. The peaceful rhythm of the afternoon shattered with the thunderous arrival of 3 horses, ridden hard into town. Their riders dismounted with swaggering confidence, dust-covered men with hard eyes and harder expressions. Clay Dobbs, a tall man with a cruel smirk permanently etched onto his face, led the trio. Behind him followed Lynx, lean and predatory with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, and Buck Malone, a mountain of a man whose knuckles bore the scars of countless brawls. "Boys, I'm parched," Clay drawled, his spurs jingling ominously with each step. "Let's see what this dump of a town has to offer." The shop bell rang violently as they burst through the door, their presence immediately filling the small space with menace. Sam looked up, his expression unchanged as he set aside his ledger. "Afternoon, gentlemen. What can I help you with today?" he asked, his voice steady and unassuming. Clay sauntered forward, deliberately knocking over a display of canned peaches. The tins clattered across the wooden floor. "Well, would you look at that?" he said with mock concern. "Seems you've got a mess to clean up, old-timer." Lynx snickered, moving behind the counter uninvited. "Quite the establishment you got here, Grandpa. Must be really profitable." He ran his fingers along the shelves, knocking items to the floor with casual cruelty. Sam remained still, watching them with an unreadable expression. "If you're hungry, I've got some fresh candy sticks on the house for newcomers." The Outlaws exchanged glances before erupting into laughter. Buck stepped forward, looming over the counter. "Hear that, boys? Grandpa's offering us candy." He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the polished counter surface. Sam didn't flinch, didn't wipe away the spittle, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something cold and calculating that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Sure you wouldn't prefer something stronger than candy?" Sam asked, his voice suddenly carrying an edge that made Lynx pause momentarily. But before they could walk out, Buck's massive hand reached for something that caught his eye, something that should have remained untouched. If you're enjoying this tale of justice in the Old West, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story of betrayal, redemption, and the return of a legend, hit that subscribe button now, because this is just the beginning of a wild ride through Coldwater Ridge. Buck's rough fingers closed around a small object tucked behind the counter, a tarnished tin star, its 5 points dulled by time, but still recognizable as a lawman's badge. Lynx sidled over, his thin lips curling into a mocking smile as he plucked it from Buck's grasp. "Well, well, well, what have we here?" Lynx twirled the badge between his fingers. "Sheriff Gramps, huh? Is that what you used to be before you got too old and brittle to do anything but sell sugar to kids?" Sam's face remained impassive, though a muscle twitched almost imperceptibly along his jawline. "That's just an old relic. Best put it back now." Clay snorted, knocking over a barrel of flour with his boot. White powder billowed up like a ghost across the wooden planks. "Seems like everything in this store is an old relic, including the proprietor." The 3 men laughed, But their amusement was cut short when Buck's wandering eye caught something else, something gleaming behind a glass display case that none of the townsfolk had ever seen Sam open. Inside lay a Colt Peacemaker, its barrel and cylinder polished to a mirror shine despite its obvious age. The wooden grip was inlaid with silver, and even from a distance, one could see the fine scrollwork etched into the metal. "Now that's more like it," Buck murmured, moving toward the case. "That's a real piece of hardware." Sam's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Don't touch that." The words weren't shouted, barely raised above a whisper. But something in the tone made all three men freeze momentarily. Buck's hand hovered over the glass, and for a flickering second, uncertainty crossed his brutish features. Clay recovered first, stepping closer to Sam. His hand rested provocatively on the butt of his own pistol. "What are you gonna do, Grandpa? Bore us to death with stories about the good old days?" Sam looked directly into Clay's eyes, and something in that steady gaze caused the outlaw to shift his weight, uncomfortable despite himself. For the briefest moment, it wasn't a frail shopkeeper standing before him, but something altogether more dangerous. "Some things are best left untouched," Sam said quietly. "Some memories best left buried." Buck shook off his hesitation and rapped his knuckles on the glass. "I bet this old shooter hasn't fired a round in decades. Probably rust in the chamber." "Like its owner," Lynx added with a sneer, though he kept a slightly wider berth from Sam than before. The tension in the room snapped with the sound of the shop bell. Sheriff Cole Barrett entered, his tall frame filling the doorway, hand resting casually on his holstered Remington. "Gentlemen," he nodded, eyes taking in the scattered merchandise and the flour-dusted floor. "I trust you're planning to pay for any damages to Mr. Granger's establishment." Clay held the sheriff's gaze for a long moment before breaking into an easy, insincere smile. "Just having a friendly chat with the old man. No harm done." He tossed a coin onto the counter. "For your trouble, Gramps." As the outlaws filed out, Buck glanced back at the display case, a flash of something like recognition or fear crossing his face. But they were gone as quickly as they'd arrived, leaving only their dust and disrespect behind. Sheriff Barrett turned to Sam. "You all right?" Sam nodded, already reaching for a broom. "I'm fine, Cole." But over at the saloon, someone was watching through the window who knew exactly who Sam Granger used to be. The Lucky Ace Saloon hummed with the familiar sounds of frontier life, the clinking of glasses, rumbling laughter, and the tinny notes of a poorly tuned piano. Near the window, an older drifter named Amos Harper sat nursing a whiskey, his weather-beaten face half hidden beneath the shadow of his hat. His eyes, however, remained fixed on the three outlaws swaggering across the street. "Those boys just poked the devil in his sleep," Amos muttered, taking a slow sip of his drink. Hank, the bartender, glanced up from wiping down the bar. "You talking about old Sam? Hell, that man wouldn't hurt a fly. Too gentle for his own good." A dry chuckle escaped Amos's lips. "That what you think? Shows what you know." He turned from the window, fixing Hank with a knowing stare. "The Sam Granger I knew wasn't gentle. He was a shadow, a whisper, a ghost with a gun." Several patrons at nearby tables quieted, drawn by the drifter's words. "You're spinning tales again, old man," Hank scoffed, though curiosity edged his voice. Amos shook his head slowly. "Ever heard of the Phantom Shooter?" The question settled over the saloon like dust after a stampede. A few of the older men exchanged glances. One of them, a cattle driver with a silver-streaked beard, straightened in his chair. "That's just a legend," the cattle driver said. "Story to scare youngsters." "Is it?" Amos leaned forward. "They say he rode with Wild Bill Hickok in the early days. Never seen in daylight during a gunfight. Moved like a ghost, appearing from nowhere, vanishing just as quick. They called him the Phantom because no one ever saw his face clearly, and those who claimed they did, well, they weren't around long to describe it." Hank paused his wiping. "And you're saying our Sam?" "I'm saying that when Hickok was gunned down in Deadwood, playing his dead man's hand, something in his partner broke. The Phantom disappeared, but not before he hunted down every man connected to Bill's death. Amos drained his glass. 7 men, 7 shots, 7 graves. The saloon had fallen completely silent now. He vanished after that, Amos continued. Some say he died, others say he found God. But the truth? He tapped his finger against the rim of his empty glass. The truth is, he got tired of the killing, tired of the blood. So he put away his guns and became something else. And his name was Sam, a voice whispered from the back. Amos nodded solemnly. His name was Sam. Hank frowned, glancing through the window at the quiet general store across the street. Even if that fairy tale were true, and I ain't saying it is, that was 30 years ago. Sam's an old man now. Old wolves still have teeth, Amos replied, sliding his glass forward for a refill. And those boys are about to wake one up. Outside, Clay and his men laughed loudly as they mounted their horses, unaware that Coldwater Ridge was about to wake up from its long, peaceful slumber. The next morning dawned with an air of unease hanging over Coldwater Ridge like a storm cloud. Word of Amos's tale had spread through town, though most dismissed it as the ramblings of a drunk. Sam opened his store at sunrise, as he always did, methodically sweeping the porch and arranging his wares as if nothing had happened the day before. By mid-morning, Clay Dobbs and his men returned, looking for entertainment in a town that offered little. They rode slowly down the main street, eyes scanning for opportunity or trouble, preferably both. Outside the general store, young Sarah Miller was loading supplies into her wagon, her 5-year-old daughter playing nearby with a cloth doll. Clay reined his horse to a stop, watching the woman struggle with a heavy sack of flour. "Need a hand with that, pretty lady?" he called, his smile not reaching his eyes. Sarah glanced up, instinctively pulling her daughter closer. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied, her voice tight with apprehension. "Don't seem fine to me," Clay dismounted, sauntering toward her. "A delicate thing like you shouldn't be doing such heavy work. Where's your husband?" She hesitated. "He's away on business." Link snickered. "Convenient." He joined Clay, circling the wagon like a predator. "Maybe we could keep you company while he's gone." The shop bell jingled as Sam stepped outside, his movements unhurried but deliberate. He stood on the porch, watching silently, hands clasped before him. "Morning, Mr. Granger," Sarah called, relief evident in her voice. Sam nodded. "Sarah, everything all right?" Clay turned, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption. "Well, if it isn't Sheriff Gramps again. Still playing protector?" "The lady was just leaving," Sam said quietly, his eyes never leaving Clay's face. "Was she now?" Clay reached for his pistol, drawing it with practiced ease. He fired a shot into the sky, causing Sarah's daughter to scream and several townspeople to scatter for cover. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, old man. In fact, I'm thinking this town needs to understand who's running things now." Sam stepped off the porch, his gait slow but steady. He positioned himself between Clay and Sarah. "Take your horse and ride out, son. You're making a mistake you'll regret." Clay laughed, but there was something hollow in the sound. "Listen to him, boys. The old fool thinks he's threatening me." He leveled his gun at Sam's chest. "I could put a hole in you where you stand, and no one would do a thing about it." Sam didn't flinch. His eyes, usually mild, had transformed, cold and assessing, like a predator calculating distance and timing. When he spoke, his voice carried a deadly calm that hadn't been there before. "You could try." Something in those 3 words, or perhaps in the way Sam's posture had subtly shifted, caused Buck to shift nervously in his saddle. "Clay," he muttered, "maybe we ought to—" "Shut up!" Clay snapped, though uncertainty had crept into his expression. He holstered his gun with an exaggerated flourish. "You ain't worth the bullet, old-timer. Not today, anyway." The 3 outlaws backed away, mounting their horses. As they rode off, Clay called over his shoulder, "We'll be seeing you real soon, Granger." Sam watched them go, then turned to help Sarah with her supplies. "Best get home and lock your doors tonight," he murmured, "and keep that shotgun of yours loaded." That night, as darkness fell over Coldwater Ridge, someone silently broke into the back of Sam's general store, and that's when the mask finally came off. Sam Granger didn't sleep deeply anymore, a habit from years spent with one eye open. So when the floorboard in his storeroom creaked, his eyes snapped open instantly. He lay motionless in his small bed behind the shop, listening to the careful footsteps moving through his store. No random burglar moved that carefully. No desperate drifter took such measured steps. Whoever was in his store knew exactly what they were looking for. Silently, Sam slid from his bed. His bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor as he moved to a specific plank beside his nightstand. With practiced ease, he lifted the board, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside lay a worn gun belt, the leather cracked but well-oiled. The holster held a Colt Peacemaker, the twin of the one displayed in the case, but this one showed signs of extensive use. Where the displayed gun was pristine, this one bore the marks of a lifetime of service. Nicks in the barrel, worn grips, and a phantom emblem etched into the cylinder. Sam lifted the gun with reverent familiarity. It fit his hand as if it had never left it, as if 30 years had simply evaporated. He didn't buckle on the belt, just held the Colt at his side as he moved toward the store. In the darkness, the intruder was bent over Sam's desk, rifling through a drawer. A match flared briefly, illuminating the scarred face of Lynx as he examined something he'd found. An old sepia photograph showing two men standing shoulder to shoulder. One was unmistakably Wild Bill Hickok in his prime, long hair and mustache iconic even then. The other was a younger Sam Granger, standing tall and confident, a phantom emblem visible on his vest. "Found what you were looking for?" Sam's voice cut through the darkness. Lynx spun around, dropping the photo and reaching for his gun. But Sam's quiet voice stopped him cold. "I warned you once." The flash of the Colt lit up the dark store for a split second. The sound echoed through the quiet town, followed immediately by the thud of a body hitting the floor. Sheriff Cole Barrett arrived minutes later, lantern held high, to find the back door of the general store swinging open in the night breeze. Inside there was nobody, just a pool of blood and drag marks leading out the door. On the floor, scorched into the wood by a heated knife, was a symbol that made the sheriff's blood run cold. A circle with a jagged line through it, the mark of the Phantom. Cole swept his lantern around the empty store. "Sam?" he called out. But Samuel Granger was nowhere to be found. Only the smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, and the faint creak of the floorboard settled back into place over an empty hiding spot. By morning, the Phantom's second warning would be delivered, and this time, everyone would hear it. The body of Buck Malone was discovered at first light, slumped against the hitching post outside the general store. The massive man sat unnaturally still, his vacant eyes staring at the rising sun he'd never see again. A single bullet hole pierced his hat and then his forehead. A marksman's shot, clean and deliberate. In his lifeless hand was clutched a folded piece of paper, held there as if whoever killed him had deliberately placed it in his grasp. Sheriff Cole Barrett gently pried the note free, unfolding it for the gathered crowd to see. Written in neat, controlled handwriting were 6 words that sent a chill through the onlookers. "Second warning, there will be no third." "Jesus," whispered a townsman, backing away from the corpse. "It's just like Amos said." By mid-morning, the entire town was buzzing with fear and speculation. Sheriff Barrett found Sam Granger in his customary place behind the counter, calmly arranging merchandise as if nothing had happened. The store had been meticulously cleaned. Not a trace of blood remained on the floor. "Morning, Cole," Sam nodded, setting down a jar of pickles. "Terrible business outside." The sheriff studied Sam's face carefully. "Where were you last night, Sam?" "Right here," Sam replied without hesitation. "Slept through the whole thing. Getting old means I sleep like the dead." A hint of irony touched his voice on the last word. Funny thing, Cole said, running his fingers along the counter. Man gets shot right outside your store and you don't hear a thing. Sam shrugged. Not so funny when you're my age. Ears aren't what they used to be. Sheriff Barrett's gaze drifted to Sam's hands, steady, weathered, but notably free of gunpowder residue. You know anything about this phantom mark people are talking about? Just old legends, Sam replied, meeting Cole's eyes directly. Ghost stories from a bygone era. Before Cole could press further, the shop door burst open. Clay Dobbs stormed in, his face twisted with rage and fear. You, he snarled, pointing at Sam. What did you do to Buck? Sam regarded him calmly. I've been here all night, Mr. Dobbs. The sheriff can vouch for my whereabouts. Clay's hand hovered over his gun. Buck's dead with a bullet in his brain, and Lynx is missing. This ain't over, old man. Perhaps you should consider riding out while you still can, Sam suggested mildly. Clay spat on the floor. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I sent it to my friends. By tomorrow, this town will be crawling with my boys, and we're going to tear it apart until we find who did this. He leaned across the counter, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. And then I'm coming for you, Granger. I don't know how, but I know you're involved. As Clay stormed out, Sheriff Barrett turned back to Sam, something like recognition dawning in his eyes. Sam, he said quietly, is there something you want to tell me about who you really are? But Sam just smiled faintly and continued arranging his jars, while somewhere in town the Phantom prepared to ride again. At dawn, Sam Granger stood alone on a small hill just outside town, his figure silhouetted against the rising sun. Before him lay a simple wooden marker, weathered by years of prairie winds and summer storms. The crude inscription read only James Butler Hickok, 1837 to 1876. Wild Bill's final resting place wasn't in Deadwood where he fell, but here, a secret known to only one living soul. Sam knelt slowly, his old knees protesting as he placed a single silver bullet on the grave. Time to ride one last time, Bill, he murmured, his voice carried away by the morning breeze. Just like we promised. His mind drifted back to Deadwood, 1876. The saloon was crowded, smoke hanging thick in the air. Young Sam had noticed the man in the corner, hand suspiciously hidden beneath his coat. When the stranger drew on Bill's back, it was Sam who moved faster than thought, his bullet finding the would-be assassin's heart before the man could pull his trigger. You watch my back, I'll watch yours, Dolly to Balmutheim, Bill had said afterward, clapping Sam on the shoulder. To the grave and beyond. But Sam hadn't been there when Jack McCall shot Bill from behind. He'd been tracking a bounty 2 towns over. By the time he returned, his friend was already cold in the ground. What followed was a reckoning that became legend. The Phantom's vengeance. 7 men connected to Bill's death, each eliminated with mechanical precision. Not just McCall, who was eventually hanged, but the men who paid him, who provided the gun, who created the circumstances. After the 7th grave was filled, Sam Granger disappeared. The Phantom became a ghost story told around campfires, and a quiet shopkeeper built a life far from the blood and smoke. Now, returning to his store, Sam moved with renewed purpose. From a locked chest, he withdrew items untouched for decades. A black duster coat, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low to shadow his face, and the gun belt he'd held just the night before. Sam stood before his small mirror, watching as the shopkeeper's mild expression faded away. His shoulders straightened despite the years, his stance shifted, and his eyes hardened with deadly focus. With practiced movements that belied his age, he checked the Colt's action, spinning the cylinder to ensure all 6 chambers were loaded. Never thought I'd wear you again, he murmured to the Phantom emblem on his belt buckle. From his window, Sam watched as riders began to arrive in town. Hard men with harder faces, all answering Clay's call. 6 of them gathered outside the saloon, checking weapons and laughing roughly. They had no idea what awaited them. Let them come, Sam whispered. buckling the gun belt around his waist. For the first time in 30 years, the weight felt right again, natural, like reuniting with an old friend. The Phantom was back. And before the sun set, Coldwater Ridge would remember why that name once made even the bravest men tremble. By mid-afternoon, Clay Dobbs and his reinforcements had turned Coldwater Ridge into their personal playground. They rode through the streets, firing shots into the air, smashing windows, and terrorizing anyone brave enough to remain outdoors. Shopkeepers locked their doors, families huddled in back rooms, and the town that had known peace for decades suddenly resembled a battlefield waiting to happen. "Granger!" Clay bellowed, reining his horse before the general store. "Come out and face me, you coward!" But the store remained shuttered, no sign of the old shopkeeper visible within. "Maybe he ran," suggested one of Clay's men, a scarred brute named Harlan. Clay shook his head. "He's here somewhere. Spread out and find him. I want him alive." The men split up, 2 by 2, moving through the town's narrow alleys and side streets. Sheriff Barrett watched helplessly from his office, outgunned and outmanned, waiting for an opportunity to act without getting himself killed. In the shadows between buildings, a figure in a black duster moved silently, always one step ahead of his pursuers. Sam had transformed completely, his stooped posture gone, replaced by the fluid movement of a predator. He laid his traps methodically, drawing the men exactly where he wanted them. The first pair of outlaws found themselves in a narrow passage behind the livery stable. "See anything?" one asked, squinting into the shadows. His companion never answered. A whisper of movement, a glint of metal, and the man fell with a knife buried in his throat. Before the second outlaw could even reach for his gun, a shot rang out, so perfectly placed it severed his gun belt and sent his pistol clattering to the ground. "Who's there?" the man called, panic rising in his voice. "Show yourself!" But the only answer was another shot, this one grazing his arm. A warning, not a kill. "It's the Phantom!" the outlaw screamed, fleeing back toward the main street. Across town, 2 more of Clay's men were methodically searching the abandoned schoolhouse when the sound of boots on the wooden floor drew their attention. "There he is!" one shouted, firing blindly at a shadow. A return shot extinguished the lantern they carried, plunging them into darkness. 2 more shots followed with surgical precision, one removing a gun from an outlaw's hand, the other creasing his partner's thigh. From a rooftop overlooking the main street, Amos steadied his Winchester, providing silent support as Sam ghosted through the town. When one of Clay's men spotted Sam crossing between buildings, Amos's bullets splintered the boardwalk at the outlaw's feet, sending him diving for cover. Within an hour, 5 of Clay's 6 reinforcements were wounded, disarmed, or fleeing town, leaving bloody trails in their wake. Not a single one had seen their attacker's face clearly. Clay found himself alone in the middle of the main street, his confidence replaced by genuine fear. "Where are you, Granger?" he shouted, gun drawn, spinning in circles. Behind him, a quiet voice replied, "I'm right here, son, and I'm offering you one last chance." Clay Dobbs spun around, his gun hand shaking slightly as he faced the figure standing 30 paces away. Gone was the stooped, harmless shopkeeper. In his place stood the Phantom, straight-backed and imposing despite his years, black duster billowing slightly in the afternoon breeze. The wide-brimmed hat shadowed his features, but those eyes, cold, calculating, unforgiving, were unmistakable. "So the rumors are true," Clay said, forcing a bravado he no longer felt. "The old man's got teeth after all." Sam's voice carried clearly across the distance between them. "Ride out now. Leave Coldwater Ridge and never return. That's the only mercy you'll get from me." A crowd had begun to gather at the edges of the street, townspeople emerging cautiously from their hiding places, drawn by the confrontation unfolding before them. Sheriff Barrett stood on the steps of his office, hand near his gun, but making no move to interfere. Clay's face contorted with rage and humiliation. "You think I'm afraid of some washed-up old gunslinger? You killed my friends." I gave them warnings they chose to ignore, Sam replied evenly. Just as I warned you. Clay spat in the dirt. Warnings? I'll show you a warning. His eyes narrowed dangerously. I know all about you now, Phantom. How you rode with Hickok. How you hunted men down like animals after he died. His mouth twisted into an ugly smile. In fact, my pa used to tell stories about you. Did you know that? He said he was there in Deadwood when Wild Bill got what was coming to him. Something flickered across Sam's face. A brief spasm of old pain. Clay seized on the reaction. That's right, Joseph Dobbs. He helped plan the whole thing. Said Hickok needed to be put down like a mad dog. For a heartbeat, the street was utterly silent. Your father, Sam said softly, died in a hunting accident near the Wyoming Territory in 1877. Clay's eyes widened in sudden understanding. You killed him. He was the seventh man, Sam acknowledged, and you're about to make the same mistake he did, underestimating what I'm capable of. Clay's hand tensed over his holster. We'll see about that, old man. I've killed a dozen men in fair fights. This won't be fair, Sam warned him. But it will be just. In a flash of movement, Clay drew first, his revolver clearing leather with practiced speed. But Sam moved like lightning, his draw so fast several onlookers would later swear they never even saw him pull his weapon. Two shots cracked across the street almost simultaneously. Clay's bullet whizzed harmlessly past Sam's ear. Sam's first shot struck Clay's gun, sending it spinning from his hand. His second grazed Clay's shoulder, dropping the outlaw to one knee. Sam approached slowly, his Colt still raised. Your father died with more courage than you've shown. He at least looked me in the eye at the end. Clay glared up, blood seeping through his fingers as he clutched his wounded shoulder. Finish it then. Sam holstered his weapon. No, you'll live with this defeat. Ride out and tell anyone who'll listen what happened here today. As the townspeople watched in stunned silence, no one noticed the stranger at the back of the crowd who recognized Sam's face from an old wanted poster, a face that would change everything. Night had fallen over Coldwater Ridge, but the town remained wide awake. The saloon buzzed with excited chatter as townspeople recounted what they'd witnessed that afternoon. The legend of the Phantom had been reborn, growing more elaborate with each retelling. In the corner, Amos nursed a whiskey, a satisfied smile playing on his weathered face. Sheriff Cole Barrett found Sam back at his store, methodically cleaning his Colt by lantern light. The shopkeeper had returned. The black duster folded away, the deadly precision of the Phantom once again masked behind an old man's gentle demeanor. But the transformation couldn't be unseen. You should have told me, Cole said, closing the door behind him. Sam didn't look up from his work. Would you have believed me if I had? Probably not, Cole admitted, settling into a chair across from Sam. The Phantom was just a story my father used to tell. Never imagined I'd be serving as sheriff in the same town where he retired. He paused, studying Sam's face. We've got a problem. Sam's hands stilled. What kind of problem? There was a Pinkerton agent in town today, man named Hollister, been tracking outlaw gangs through the territory. Cole leaned forward, lowering his voice. He recognized you from some old files. Says you're still wanted for the vigilante killings after Hickok's death. Sam resumed cleaning his gun, movements deliberate and unhurried. That was a lifetime ago. Not to the law, it wasn't. Cole rubbed his chin nervously. Hollister's sending a telegram to his superiors. Says he's got evidence that Samuel Granger and the Phantom shooter are one and the same. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft sound of the cleaning cloth against metal. Is it true? Cole finally asked. About those 7 men? Sam set down his gun, meeting Cole's gaze directly. Bill was more than just my partner. He was like a brother. When he died, something broke inside me. His voice remained steady, but his eyes reflected decades-old pain. I hunted them down, one by one. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. "The law won't see it that way," Cole warned. "They'll hang you." Sam nodded slowly. "I made peace with that possibility long ago." "I can buy you time," Cole offered. "Delay Hollister, maybe misdirect him, but you should consider moving on." Sam's expression softened. "This town gave me 30 years of peace, Cole. I'm grateful for that. But you're right. My time here is done." He extended his hand. "Thank you." Cole shook it firmly. "I owe you that much. My father always said Coldwater Ridge was blessed to have a guardian angel no one recognized." "No angels here," Sam replied, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Just an old gunslinger who found something worth protecting." As Sheriff Barrett left, Sam glanced at the small photograph of himself and Hickok that had hung behind his counter for 3 decades, his last tie to the past, and his final piece of unfinished business. The dawn sky painted Coldwater Ridge in hues of amber and gold as Sam Granger made his final preparations. He'd spent the night writing letters, setting his affairs in order with the precision that had defined both his lives. The general store was immaculate, each item in its place, as if preparing for an inspection that would never come. Sheriff Barrett found a sealed envelope on his desk when he arrived at his office that morning. His name was written on the front in Sam's neat, controlled handwriting. Inside was a folded letter and a small key. Cole unfolded the paper carefully, reading the words of a man who had become his friend. "Sheriff Barrett, by the time you read this, I'll be gone." The key enclosed opens a strong box beneath the 3rd floorboard under the counter in my store. Inside, you'll find legal documents transferring ownership of the general store to young Thomas Wells. The boy's been working for me in secret for months, learning the trade. He's an orphan with a good head on his shoulders, much like I was at his age. He'll need guidance, but I trust you'll provide that. To the town of Coldwater Ridge, I leave my gratitude. For 30 years, you gave an old gunslinger something he never thought he'd find: peace. That gift was worth more than gold. There's one more document in the box, a confession to the 7 killings that followed Wild Bill's death. It details the circumstances and my responsibility alone. Maybe it will bring closure to those events, or maybe it will just be another page in a forgotten history. Either way, the truth deserves to be known. Tell Amos I haven't forgotten our pact. He'll understand what that means. And finally, when people ask what happened, tell them the Phantom rode again, for justice, not revenge. There's a difference, though it took me most of my life to understand it. Samuel Granger. Sheriff Barrett folded the letter slowly, slipping it into his vest pocket. Through his window, he could see the townspeople gathering in front of the general store, murmuring among themselves at finding it closed for the first time in 3 decades. With a heavy sigh, Cole picked up his hat and stepped outside. The crowd quieted as he approached. "Where's Sam?" Mrs. Peterson asked, clutching her basket anxiously. "Is he all right?" Cole looked out over the faces turned toward him, faces of people who had known Sam Granger only as their kindly shopkeeper, never suspecting the legend who had lived among them. "Sam's gone," he said simply. "Left in the night." Whispers rippled through the crowd. In the back, Amos stood silent, a knowing look in his weathered eyes. "But he left something behind," Cole continued, producing the key. "A future for this town, and a young man who needs our support." As the sheriff's words sank in, a lone rider crested the hill outside town, a black-clad figure silhouetted against the rising sun. For a moment, he paused, looking back at Coldwater Ridge one last time, before disappearing like smoke into the vast horizon. 8 months after the Phantom's departure, Coldwater Ridge had transformed. The general store thrived under Thomas Wells' enthusiastic management, its shelves stocked with new merchandise that brought customers from neighboring settlements. The young man had Sam's eye for detail, if not his mysterious past. On the boardwalk outside, Sheriff Barrett watched a group of travelers dismount, their curious gazes sweeping the town's single street. "Excuse me," one man approached, tipping his hat. "Is this where the Phantom shooter faced down that gang last year? We heard stories all the way in Denver." Cole smiled faintly. "You might be disappointed. He was just an old man with good aim." "But was he really Wild Bill's partner?" another asked eagerly. Before Cole could answer, Amos appeared at his side. "Some legends are best left mysterious, friend," the old drifter said with a wink. "Makes for better telling around campfires." The tourists moved on, disappointed but undeterred, heading toward the saloon where Hank had started charging extra for authentic phantom shooter tales. Cole and Amos shared a knowing glance. "Heard anything?" Amos asked quietly. Cole shook his head. "Not a word. But I reckon that's how he wants it." Their eyes drifted to the door of the general store, where a small, carefully carved emblem had appeared one morning. A circle with a jagged line through it, the mark of the phantom. Amos smiled, tipping his hat to the wind. Some men leave legacies in blood. Others are kind. Sam managed both. As the sun set over Coldwater Ridge, the legend of the phantom lived on. Not in wanted posters or dime novels, but in the peaceful streets of a town that would never forget its guardian. If you thought this story was wild, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.